Okay, how can you be the perfect ninja? In this video, I'm going to go through what you shouldn't do and what you should do to be the perfect ninja. And I'm being joined by the ultimate, the awesome Steven Nojiri, who's going to take us through the questions and I'm going to comment on them. By the end of this video, you should have a really good idea of what you should do in training, what you shouldn't do in training, and really, are you on the right direction? So my name's Antony Cummins. I'm the author of books like The Book of Ninja, The Book of Samurai, The Book of Bushido, The Ultimate Art of War. You can get all these in the links below. I'll send you some links for me and Steven. And first of all, let's talk to Steven.
Hello, I am Steven Nojiri, the author of Samurai Traditions of the Tata Genji, and that's essentially my focus with samurai history, a samurai ethno-history, Tata Genji traditions, Kusunoki traditions, the Jingunden, the Second Southern Court. And Antony Cummins has asked me to participate in this video, which essentially just responding to some key points about what it would take for someone in the modern setting to do and study to legitimately sort of be considered an efficient student of the Shinobi arts.
So let's start where everybody wants to start, with martial arts. Steven, what do you think about martial arts?
Ooh, martial arts. That's a tough one. First thing to say is that as a shinobi, you don't necessarily need to have study martial arts. But because a shinobi position is a samurai position, could also be a nashigaru position. But because it is a warrior's position, it therefore you would need to have a working knowledge of hand-to-hand combat and weapon systems foundationally as a warrior. Then you would be shinobi. Okay, so as a warrior, you would need to know. So the question would be what to study. And I'd say first and foremost, study whatever. So whatever shinobi tradition you're following, whether you're following something that's more like Kusunoki and Jingunden, Tata Genji, or whether you're following something that's more like Koshuru, Hojuru, because these present themselves very differently. So whatever system you're studying, find out what schools of hand-to-hand combat, what schools of weaponry that they were associated with, and then see if you can train in that school or those schools.
So basically, guys, what you've got to do is remember that martial arts is needed as a warrior, but it isn't needed to be a ninja. People need martial arts just in general because you've got to defend yourself on the street. You might even be just a farmer. You might need, even farmers used to learn martial arts, and they used to go to samurai and ronin to learn martial arts. And they used to, you know, one thing that we don't have recorded in the tradition is the farmer martial arts. We just don't seem to have them, even though they clearly would be there. They all had swords. They would have time, obviously not as much time as a professional warrior to train, but they would do some training. So in a perfect world, we could basically find which tradition you would follow in as a ninja and which martial arts you should do. That means, say, if somebody's from Iga, you find out what martial arts they were doing in Iga. A difficult question. If somebody's from Kishu, I know, because I studied Natori Ryu from Kishu, probably the best swordsmanship there, or the most practiced swordsmanship, was Yagyu Shinkage Ryu, because it was under the Tokugawa family. So you probably steer towards Yagyu. But then there's a reality of what can you actually do where you live in America somewhere. The simple thing is, do your best to stick to Japanese martial arts. Get some ground fighting, get some projectile weapons, get some bladed weapons, get some throwing techniques, and basically then start to look at moving that into more the military-esque arts of war. But we'll get onto that later.
One thing that there's no way around is if you want to study shinobi methods, you have to become proficient at lockpicking and lock bypassing. So you can find it in the Bansen Shukais, or you can sort of study the traditional Japanese locks and door mechanisms, etc., and how to pick them and how to bypass them. But I'm not advocating for any criminal activity, not advocating for it, but you do need to learn how to pick a pin tumbler lock, for example. You need to be able to have some proficiency in breaking and entering. Again, no criminal activity is being advocated here, but you must have a knowledge of lock picking and lock bypassing, or bypassing the entirety of the door.
Okay, lockpicking is considered one of the lower skills of ninjutsu, but one of the most needed. So when I say lower, in ninjutsu, you want the high level strategy, but you've got to have your basic level. There's no point being able to get there, get to the house and not get in it. So even though it is one of the lesser degrees of ninja training, you should be doing it. And what the problem is here is, do you want to learn historical ninjutsu, or do you want to learn ninjutsu today in case you actually need to do something? You've got to make that choice yourself. So you'd have to decide between whether you're going to do historical Japanese locks, which have wings and little like pins like this that you've got to push down and slip out, or your tumbler locks and all those types of modern locks. Or are you going to do both? But you have to be doing something, or at least have a working knowledge of what's going on in the locks. But also remember, you bypass locks. Stephen there was using some words like there's lock picking and lock bypassing. Bypassing means you don't touch the lock, you go around it by holes in the wall, opening windows, different things, going through the roof, going under the floors. But there's also lock picking, getting the locks out, all that type of stuff. So
we also have to consider psychology. A Shinobi student should be well versed in human psychology, human thinking patterns, etc., etc. But we run into an interesting issue here, because should you study traditional Shinobi psychology or should you study modern day psychology? And I think that's an interesting debate. At this point in time, I would say probably best if you study a little bit of both, to be honest. Modern psychology, of course, because it's the modern period. But I would advocate strongly for studying the traditional Shinobi psychology systems. For example, for the Kusunoki Taragenji Jingunden, it means studying the Niso Daigo and becoming very familiar with the 16 personality types. So again, different systems approach this differently, but you have to pick some kind of psychology system and become well versed into it, because you have to be able to read human pattern and predict human pattern.
Now here, your best bet is probably, like Stephen said, is a little bit of both, but you probably want to start with a basic psychology book. Just something, you don't need to go mentally mad into sort of like Western psychology and who's which psychologist and all that, because the point here is for you to be able to read people, not to be able to tell us all how good you know or how much you know about Western psychology. So what you need to do, guys, to get it down to the basic level is understand what is psychology, what is philosophy, and we'll talk more about religion and things like that, philosophy in a bit. But basically, what is psychology, what's going on, and then you need to start studying the Japanese stuff, whether it be the Shoninki, which is True Path of the Ninja. You look at the Kusunoki stuff with Stephen, but you can start to break that down. But unfortunately, in such a short video, all I can say is it's going to be through our books. But if you want me and Stephen to do a more detailed thing on psychology, ninja philosophy and all that, we can do later.
Now, I know that the topic of religion and magic is going to be a touchy one with a lot of people, but I'm sorry, guys, there's really no way around it. If you're trying to genuinely follow in the footsteps of the Shinobi of the past by being as best of a Shinobi student in the present as you can be, you have to, there's no way around it. You have to have a good working knowledge and dabble in Buddhism, Shinto, black magic, etc., etc., etc. There is so much religion and spirituality and magic in the Shinobi arts that if you do not participate in the religious magical aspects, you are losing not only a gigantic piece of the techniques, but you're also losing the very foundation. For example, in the Jingunden Kusunoki Taragenji tradition, the entire system is founded on religious principles. So if you reject those or ignore those, the very foundation of the system is gone. And not to mention, you would never dabble in all of the magic and all the rituals, which is literally like half of the material.
This is probably a cultural thing between America and England here. Most likely, if any of you are English, you probably don't care, because probably we have the least going to church country in the world. And I think we were voted that once. Obviously, in America, you do get a lot of people who are dedicated Christians who would not do that. But so I've got to talk to you directly first. Basically, look at your own history. Magic and magical elements were well entwined with Catholicism, probably less with Protestantism, but very much with Catholicism, and a lot with Christianity. There are loads of medieval Christian prayers, everything, magical runes, things to do, and that are all considered perfectly good magic. No problem there. But of course, the shinobi definitely dabble in the darker arts. Now, one of the first mentions of shinobi in the West, which comes from J. Gluck, which is a book that's now out of print, states that they are black magicians. They normally were not considered as this ninja throwing star thing with, assassins until a bit later. Their actual first real touch in the West is, as the historical section in the medieval period was, they are infiltrators. But then by the time you get to the 20th century, it's like, are they like magic users, magicians or something? Then bit by bit the comics come in and we start to get this, oh, they're assassins. So, but even if you are a Christian, so basically if you're not a Christian, it doesn't matter, just do this. But even if you are a Christian, you should have a good working knowledge of, now Shinto you would think would come first, but make that last. Buddhism first, because when the rise of the samurai, Buddhism was massive. It was coming, yes, by the Kamakura period, the Buddhism is rising up fast, very fast. But it has been pushed through China. And then, of course, you get Confucianism, which is, again, massive in different points of Japanese history. Now, people obviously jump to Shintoism is the first religion of Japan, but actually it's state religion that has a complicated history with the samurai and with the main medieval period, where Buddhism was, for the samurai, was far more focused. Okay, so you've got Confucianism, Buddhism, and you've got Shintoism, but you've also got Taoism in there. So do not forget, Taoism is just laced into it. So don't try to think of it as separate things. Have a bit of it all come together, and then you have to find the underlying black magic of ninjutsu. Of course, these are in all the books me and Steven are telling you about. Steven's the author of a few books. So let's get on to his next point.
There's also the very important point where you have to believe in the teaching. So if you're going to follow in the footsteps of the shinobi, you have to actually really sort of trust and believe in the shinobi method, which means that if you don't think that clandestine warfare is good, or you have a problem with clandestine warfare, then don't follow in the footsteps of the shinobi. If you have an issue with manipulation, or you have an issue with sort of, for example, if you have an issue with someone picking out the psychological weaknesses of individuals and then exploiting them and manipulating them, if you think that that's wrong, then you cannot be a shinobi. If you think that magic is fake, you can't be a shinobi. If you don't believe in the Buddhas or the different gods, there's no point in being a shinobi. So a very important part is, if you want to follow in the footsteps of shinobi, you have to actually believe the teachings. Otherwise, there's no point in learning the path.
So this is where we follow on from the religion. Basically, you have to divide in your mind, what are you doing and what do you want to do? You cannot be a shinobi in today's day and age. It is gone, unfortunately. The day of the samurai is gone. I have a cringeworthy story. When I first joined the Bujinkan, I remember going to the class, my first class, which was with my first teacher, which didn't last long. And I remember we were in the gym and everybody was dressed in the black gis and the green belts. And we might have accidentally got locked in, or there was a cleaner coming and we were late out. And they said, imagine bumping into us three ninjas walking down the corridor. And I wanted the earth to swallow me up and suck me down there and then. I thought that's the most embarrassing thing I've ever heard. If real ninja came out of the woodwork, they'd murder us and put our heads on spikes and laugh about it and probably piss in our eyeballs and eat off our skulls. These sort of people would all fall into nothing. So my point here, guys, is you have to decide what you want to do. If you want to fully be a shinobi as best as you can in the modern day, you follow Steven's advice. You've got to believe it. You've got to be in there. Do you believe in magic? Do you not believe in magic? Do you want to manipulate people? Are you there? Why are you doing it? If it's a historical thing, you have to realize, I'm doing this for historical practice. And you don't need an excuse for that. Just say, I'm interested in this time period in history and I really want to know about it.
I would say to anyone who wants to follow in the footsteps of the shinobi as best they can in the modern day, the first thing that they really need to do is ask themselves, do you really want to study the shinobi path? It is a path of trickery and it is a path of deceit. And almost all of the techniques are dirty techniques. They involve you tricking people and setting people up. Do you want your way to be, for example, meeting with an enemy and then tricking that person into betraying their own side, and then possibly they get killed in the process. You know, it is a path of trickery, deception, and manipulation. It is, by all intents and purposes, clandestine warfare. It's not some kind of mystical way of the mountains. Shinobi is warfare. You are at war with other human beings, but you're killing them not openly, but behind the scenes. So you have to ask yourself, is that the kind of person that you want to train yourself to be?
So for many people out there in the ninja community, they've come from the Bujinkan, and this is where the hardest leap will come, is the fact that they have been told for years and years and years, and as we were told, both me and Steven were told this when we were younger, you know, and you're like, Steven turned up to Genbukan, I obviously Bujinkan and Genbukan, and it was like, you're going to learn these ninja martial arts. This is a secret way of fighting that you've never realized, you know. And this is before the internet, when magazines like chains and knives and weapons, and it was like, oh my god, that's amazing. Do you know what I mean? But if you're coming from that background, the Bujinkan and the ninja martial arts, you then have to realize, oh sugar, do I really like ninjutsu? Do I want to do this? Because like Steven says, you are going to use psychological warfare, manipulation. You're going to push your brain to tax it. Do you enjoy academic research? Do you enjoy sitting on a Sunday afternoon when your family are at the pub or drinking, researching stuff and checking stuff and doing this? Do you or do you not? Because that's the question. If you're in for martial arts, you need to follow the samurai path. Yep. That's where you're going, and there's plenty for you to do, way more probably than the Shinobi, because the Shinobi follow the baseline of the samurai path, and then we'll go there. I'm being a little bit different. I could be contested on that point, because it does say in many Shinobi documents you must know everything about all things, but the point they're making is you've got to know a broad spectrum of stuff, whereas in the samurai path you can pick a specialization and be like, I'm a bridge builder, that's it. Everybody thinks the samurai were like fighty. One of them might be a bridge building family, it's like, or river crossing family, and they're like, or somebody who really studies esoteric ways and the stars, and they go like, okay, I've seen this chi, and what about these monsters and things like that, and that's their job. Yes, they can do a bit of soldiership, yes, they are willing to die on the front for their lord, yes, they go into battle, but they have a specific job. Shinobi have to have a broad spectrum. So if you're doing martial arts and you're like, actually I'm a bit like, I don't really fancy what you're saying now, guys, this is for you. This samurai path, the Bushido path. If it's ninja, that's for you, down this way. Now, just to plug my own stuff, this also includes ninjutsu in it later in the series of books, and Steven's will also have sections of samurai stuff inside of it.
But you can't, the Shinobi teachings, you're not allowed to just become sort of a treacherous person around the clock. The Shinobi teachings actually teach that when you're not on assignment, when you're dealing with your people, when you're not on a mission, right, you have to be the most morally upstanding human being possible. You have to be well educated. You have to be a poet. You have to be a philosopher. You have to be enthusiastic. You have to be trustworthy. You have to be pious. You have to be this incredibly upstanding human being when you're not on assignment. But then when you're on assignment, you are the most manipulative, treacherous person on the battlefield. So it is really like a double life, you know. On 1 minute, you're the most upstanding person, and then you have to be able to become the most manipulative, treacherous person at the drop of a pen. So you have to ask yourself, is that the kind of person you really want to train yourself to be?
So you have to lead a double life in your mind, and there's actually proper Shinobi teachings on this. Is like the mind in front of you, the mind behind, and to the world you present this lovely, happy, presenter-like guy, and behind that you have to be different. You have to be plans within plans, wheels within wheels, and all that, and you have to have a lot. So this is where it starts to get into the more esoteric, the more philosophical, when we're talking about that sort of way. And the idea here is that you have a base set of skills, which we've talked about, but also, and we're going to talk about more because we're trying to break it. I'm trying to break it up for you guys into different sections. But so you need to have this set of base skills, but then you need to have a moral path. And then you also need to have the dark arts at the side. But then you need to have a sheet that covers it all, which you face to the world and you don't show to anyone. And then you need to read beyond the sheets of other people into their world. And that's called Mumon no Ikan, the way through the gateless gate. You hide your visage, what's going on really behind, and then in front they hide in theirs and you go behind that. And this is where you also get substantial and insubstantial. These are all things that me and Steven can go into if you guys fancy, and this video does well. We can do all that if you like, but it just got to generate some conversation for you. So while there's a lot of things going on in this video, we can expand on them.
So any technique that you study needs to then, you need to find a way to apply that directly into the world. So, and even if you can't find a way to apply it directly into the world, you can at least study it live, like in-field study it. So for example, you may not really know how to implement using a katana to climb something, or there may be no real purpose in the modern world for that, but you should at least set your katana up with the correct setup, the right length of cord, the correct setup of the sword, etc., and then practice climbing walls with that setup. Now again, there may be no modern application or modern usage for it, but it was such a fundamental skill that if you're going to follow in the footsteps, you need to at least physically be able to do that skill, whether it has a modern application or not. It's a cultural thing. It's almost like it's the culture of the shinobi to be able to climb walls with the sword. So for example, have you ever climbed a wall with a sword? If you've never set the sword up correctly and climbed a wall with a sword, then how can you say that you've studied the shinobi arts?
So this again is where you go into the, are you doing it as a sit-down armchair academic? Are you doing it as historical information just for fun? Are you doing it because you want to be as good as a ninja? You know, you're getting there and you're inside, so you've got to slot yourself into where you're going to be. And probably you're going to be in the series where you're like, do you want to do what you can? Both me and Steven have climbed with swords and we've done all that, and I get out there and I've done tons of videos where, you know, I'm actually in the field doing stuff. And what you find, and there's other people out there who do it as well, you know, very few of us are left in this ninja community that do these videos, and very few people are left. We're at the lowest point of the ninja community world. This is as low as it's ever been since it was born in the 70s, and that's it now. We need to pull it back or it will disintegrate. So you've got to get out there, do these things, give it a go, like the Mythbusters used to do on television, or like, you know, the documentaries where you're trying to find out what happened. Have a go at something. You don't have to do it all, but have a go at these things. And what you need to do is decide, or the best way I can put it is, on that morning where you just think, shall I just put the telly on, or should I just, you think, no, I'm going to get some gear on, I'm going to go outside, I'm going to use a grappling hook, I'm going to use my sword, I'm going to set my sword up, I'm going to get it out, I'm going to dismantle it, I'm going to clean it, I'm going to look at it, I'm going to build something, I'm going to do it. That's where you've got to be like, am I going to be a good ninja, or am I going to be ninja, or am I going to be bad? By that I mean, we've been in this world now, me and Steven have been doing this for at least 15, I've been going to Japan for 20 years, and next year. And Steven has been doing this for as long, and we've been doing YouTube for 15 years. So the question becomes, where are we going to go next? Because just YouTube video after YouTube video after YouTube video of people going, that's nice, isn't producing people going out there and doing it. There's a handful of us doing it. You should be doing it too.
So another important shinobi skill is the ability to read landscape, particularly read structures. Not only the physicality of the structure, but also the human terrain of the structure as well. So you have the building, but then you have the humans that are going in and out of the building and around the building. So it creates a dual layered terrain, a physical terrain and a human terrain. So studying, say for example, a building, a castle, a fortress, whatever you want to call it, and the dual terrain of the humans and the physical landscape. Studying that, learning how they're going to get in and out of that. That is a critical piece of shinobi training. So you would need to study the text for all of the context and all the teachings for the old structures like fortresses and castles and mansions. Then you would need to figure out how to apply that in the modern setting. How am I going to, for example, get in and out of places? Now this gets a little dubious, of course, because And I'm not advocating for any criminal activity, but there would be the need to you would need to study the traditional historical examples, and then at least in your mind, I'm not saying to do it for real, but at least in your mind, train in finding a modern day analog to that, so that you could then, because the key to all of this is finding a way to link it to your actual present life so that you integrate the knowledge. When it's just something you study from the past, it doesn't integrate well. So integrating that knowledge requires modern application. So you would need to study the old ways of getting into and out of locations, but you would also have to find, at least in your mind, a way to integrate that into the present day structures.
So Stephen here is leading you into Tenchi Jin, which is basically heaven, earth, humans, okay? And the idea is you've got to have this knowledge of the landscape, of the sky, including weather, and humans, excuse me. So, and what he's doing is pushing it towards the on the ground shinobi, knife in hand, get through building stuff. But the broader sense where you start is with Art of War. And now, guys, I can't, I know it's one of my books, but I studied the Art of War, and I just couldn't remember it. I didn't get it. I was like, okay, I read it, I understand it, but it's gone. So I created that book for everyone to get it. It's totally different to any other Art of War book you've seen before. So I know that's a bit me plugging my own books, but this is the foundation of it all. The Art of War is from Sun Tzu, is way before the Shinobi. It is a fundamental aspect of building Japanese warfare, and it's there till the end.
A very fundamental yet probably problematic technique for the modern world is the shinobi's skill of being able to disguise himself and take on different personalities. This is a fundamental skill. Within the Jinganden teachings, it goes all the way back to Emperor Jimmu. Emperor Jimmu's spy, who he dressed up as an old woman and sent off to collect the dirt. It's a fundamental skill. You have to be able to become different people as needed. So that means you have to have a working knowledge of disguises, and a working knowledge of personality types, and a working knowledge of accents. And you have to be able to play a character, not just play a character, but look the character. So it's the full gamut. It's disguise, accent, background information, personality type. You have to be able to shift. You have to be able to have in your mind a handful of different characters that you can just become when needed.
It goes back to that breaking up your mind into sections. And the idea here is you can just flip into different characters and almost be split personality, basically. You've got to be able to put on a split personality at the drop of a hat. Now, back in the day, real shinobi would actually do this physically as well, where it would be a case of they would put on weight and they would strip weight. Now, you've all seen the Christian Bale to Batman, from when he goes from the machinist, I think it's called, to Batman, his weight loss transformation. It's a different person. You're like, bloody hell, fire. It's like totally different. And Shinobi used to do it as well. They'd get themselves ill. They would do sleepless could not bathe. They could become disgusting. They'd grow their hair. So they were totally different. And then they would go crash diet, shave in a certain way, shape their hairline, shape their mouth gum line, stain their teeth different colours, and all of that. And even use blind fish scales to make themselves look blind and walk around as a blind person who could actually see. Nobody's ever tried that. I'm dying for somebody to try it, but I don't think anybody wants to put fish scales in their eyes. Basically, it's just white contact lenses. So as much as nobody does this skill, by the way, nobody practices it. So maybe get yourself to an acting class and try some acting. Now, it is a difficult one because it is so out there from the normal martial arts world, where you're like, I'm doing martial arts, I'm studying yin yang, I'm studying the art of war, I'm studying the I Ching, I'm doing this. And then you're like, oh, I knew him so well. How can I compare thee to a thumb of the day? It's that sort of stuff. It is difficult. It's a difficult one, this one, but worthwhile stepping into.
And so language is actually really important for this as well. In terms of just speaking one language, monolingual, you need to be able to speak that language very well, and you need to have a lot of knowledge of dialects and accents. So if you speak only English, you should be well aware of all the dialects and accents of English. Then beyond that, if you want to be a highly effective and highly efficient shinobi student, you have to pick up knowledge of at least one or two more languages. So my suggestion would be, once you sort of get very good with English and master the dialects and accents of English, you then need to also, alongside that, you should study Japanese. Japanese is the traditional language of the Shinobi. It only makes sense that you would have at least a minimum working knowledge of Japanese. Study the hiragana, katakana, some basic sentences, etc. Be able to formulate and ask basic questions and say basic things at a minimum, and also be able to hear basic questions and basic statements and understand them and then be able to reply to them, etc., etc. Very, very straightforward. Then, as far as for a third language, wherever you live in the world, there's almost certainly another language around you. If you're in Europe, for example, English, French, German, pick one, right? Italian. If you're in the United States, either go with Spanish or go with some sort of indigenous language. But you should acquire some level of knowledge and proficiency with that language as well. So ultimately, in the end, you need to have a working knowledge of three languages, the language that you're proficient in, your first primary language, with accents and dialects. And then you should also have a working knowledge of Japanese, and you should have a working knowledge with a local language.
So this is a very important piece. This is important. Historical Shinobi, many people say, oh, they just only spoke Japanese. Now, probably they had a spattering of Chinese and of Korean, especially around the port areas, because many people say, oh, Japan's an isolated place. It was closed down way after the wars and way after Shinobi were of any use. So actually, Japan would have been at points multilingual along its borders, along the ports. There was piracy going on, loads of piracy, where groups got together with loads of languages, and I bet they had their own sort of like mix of pirate, a Creole language going on. And the Japanese would have their own dialects, so there was definitely need to study languages, even other languages, even from Japan, which was isolated. So for you, I would say the fundamental thing here is there's two things. Is you don't have to be perfect at languages. You're not going to infiltrate an enemy province. You know, you don't have to speak North Korean and know all the North Korean and go over to North Korea and be a spy. And you like put slants in your eyes and paint your face like a bit dark brown and go, oh, you know, come on, let's go Kim Jong-il or whatever. So, but you have to, I would say, start with the fundamentals of Japanese language. Now, I openly tell people I don't speak Japanese so well, but I do study it, and I have a basic knowledge. Stephen is much better than I am when it comes to kanji and all of that, and I have students who are fluent in Japanese, even though they are not Japanese, way better than I am. So the point I'm trying to say is you don't have to be an amazing Japanese speaker. You don't have to be fluent and know everything, but get you to grips with the three alphabets, get to grips with the little bits of the grammar, get to grips with the basic words. You only need a spattering of a few hundred words to get along and at least understand what's going on. To speak Japanese properly, you need about 2,500 kanji, but you need about 10,000 words. So if you have 100 kanji and a few hundred words, you're going to be able to use the core language, because about 30-40%, I'm doing this from memory, of the language is the base core language. So for example, do you know how many words in English are not English? Most of them are Greek because they're medical terms. But how often do you use the word stethoscope or endoctor? You don't use it. But the base 300 words in English are Germanic, okay? And then you will have a lot of French and some Norwegian. Yep, so Old English, Norwegian, French, and all. So your base language there, so the same with thingy. So what I do for languages, I spend money on these. I save up and spend money on these. These are leather-bound books, and basically I produce my Japanese, and I make little, let me make it easy, I produce little drawings with the points in, and I can't tell, these are the words I know, and I know most of them, and there's a few hundred here and a few hundred there, and I know probably more military terms than I do know civilian terms, but the point is, I'm doing it, and it's the same here I do the same with swords, with everything there. There's the decapitated heads, so I've learnt the hiragana down the side, and I've learnt, and that is, let me get you to another bit, all the sword points. I can't remember all of these exactly, but they're slowly blending in. They're slowly getting there. So you don't have to be perfect, but make a really good effort to understand the Japanese language. I've got another book here, and I want to add to this point is, I know I've taken a long time for this, but even with your own language, English, you're not good enough. You are not good enough. So I even have gone through all the parts of sail, hussars, dragoons, grenadiers, all the difference between a horde and a horde. You know what I mean? All the words that sound the same. What are the English words for the musical language? The parts of a violin. I've got all that there. Then I got into Germanic English, like that. And then I used Anglo-Saxon particles, the different types of weaves. Twill, for example, twill, tartan, plain, satin, herringbone, weft, warp. Those are all the words that we need to get down because it's still part of our language, and you need to be a very eloquent person when it comes to speaking as a shinobi. It's the fundamental baseline of being able to speak to people and them not automatically switch off because you're a bumpkin. Unless you want them to automatically switch off because you're a bumpkin. Yeah, that is the point. You have to know the best. You have to be the best at the language you can so you can switch it off.
Okay, so if you want to try to follow in the footsteps of the shinobi as best as you can in the modern day, then you basically do the things that we've been talking about. You get you pick a particular tradition you want to follow, because again, the different traditions explain shinobi differently. They teach it a little differently. So you pick a tradition or a cluster of traditions, stick with it. I would suggest the Kusunoki, Natori, Jingunden, etc., that cluster, the Kusunoki cluster, as I call it. That aligns you with Kusunoki, Jingunden, Taragenji. It also aligns you with Natori and Fukushima, etc., etc. Why do I say that? Because that's basically what we're like. Me and Anthony are working on those translations. So I would say pick those. You could pick Koshuru and Hojoru, but I'm not working on Koshuru or Hojoru, and I don't know anybody who is. So I would say start with those texts, begin studying those texts. But you then have to proceed forward with all the other things that I've talked about. You need to study lockpicking. And by studying it, I mean actually study it. Like physically go and practice picking locks until you are good at it. The human psychology. You want to study Niso Daigo? Excellent. Get my book, read it, study it, apply it. You want to do American modern psychology? Okay, sure, fine. It's not traditional, but it's still a form of psychology. Apply it. The trick here is that as you study each one of these sections, martial arts, for example, you go join a Koryu school or you go join a boxing club, whatever, just learn to fight. But apply it. Don't just read it and think about it. Physically get up and go out into the world and put it into application so that you integrate that knowledge into you, that you actually know how to do these things.
So if you've made it really this far into the video, then I hope we're at a point now where me and Steven can try and sell you some books. And we do apologise because we do this to create more information for you. So I unfortunately don't have all of Steven's books with me because I've moved house and they're all in boxes. But let me explain to you the different traditions you can do at the minute. So first of all, my absolute, what I would say is a must, is you get How to Be a Modern Samurai as your baseline. Totally as a baseline. And then you get The Art of War. That's your baseline. Then, if you wanted to study the Iga and Koka traditions of ninjutsu, you would study the Book of Ninja. You would study the secret traditions of the Shinobi. And you would study Iga and Koka ninja skills. That is Iga and Koka set there. If you wanted to go a little bit abstract, you can get the Lost Samurai School, which is the Mubyoshi Ryu, which is the Hagihara section. And they have their own Shinobi no Jutsu in there, very magical based. But the entire school is in there, or the most of what's left of the school, so it gives you the context and everything. But what Steven was saying is, why don't you follow me and Steven and actually go down the Kusunoki route? Now, this is the baseline for this is get Steven's book and have a look at this. This will take you through what is basically the Kusunoki idea. Then you go down this Book of Samurai series, the 2 Book of Samurai series, that will take you down how to set yourself up as Kusunoki based ideas, even though that's a bit of a mixture. Again, that could be classed as a baseline, but that's Kusunoki Ryu Shinobi no Jutsu, the true path of the ninja there. They are your baseline paths for the way of the shinobi.
Well, as far as being a shinobi goes, we have to immediately make it clear that no one can be a shinobi in 2023 because nobody can be a samurai in 2023. Samurai, ashigaru, shinobi, that all came to an end in the 1800s. And then, they're all replaced by the colonial imperial army, which then is dissolved. And then, in the 1950s, you get the whole defense force thing. There's no samurai, there's no shinobi, there's no ashigaru. So in Japan, there hasn't even been the context for shinobi to exist for over 100 years. So first things first, can't really be a shinobi. But what that means is a historical shinobi, or shinobi that is an extension from the shinobi we read about in the text. So what that means is we'd have to figure out a way to define shinobi within 2023 when referring to people who are studying shinobi ways.
So if you've made it this far in the video, basically you have to break that fantasy. If you are going to your dojo twice a week and you get dressed in your hakama and you do some iaido techniques and a kicking and punching technique, and you go home and you read just one of my books or Steven's books, you go, oh, I'm following the way of the shinobi. You are really not. You are really not. You are standing at the gate, looking in, and you will stand at that gate for 50 years. Do you know the amount of times I've heard people say, I've been doing martial arts for 35 years, Anthony. I've been studying the way of the samurai for 35 years. No, you've been stood at the gate. So let's listen to Steven on this.
So that actually goes hand in hand with someone who would consider themselves, someone who says that they study shinobi arts in the modern era, has to be somebody who doesn't get caught up in fantasy or doesn't get caught up in what they want to be true, but is very perceptive and very sensitive to overt data and subtle data, and is very skilled in the ability to accept where the overt data puts them, in other words, where the data leads, and then over time, once they become a master of following the data, then they can become more sensitive and susceptible to more subtle clues of more subtle streams of data. But from the very beginning, they have to accept where the data leads them.
Now, if you're still with us, which most people are not, because most people's attention span is nearly only about a minute long because of the YouTube and TikTok phenomena, let's let you into a little bit of a secret. You've actually been tricked. This video is not about how to become the best ninja in the world or to be the best ninja. That was the way we presented it. That was the front cover. Me and Steven started by saying, how can we stop people going down the fantasy route of just turning up to their dojo twice a week, doing some martial arts and then getting online and speaking ninja and they think they're ninjas. So we said, well, why don't we present a video of how to be the best ninja? Now, most people who watch this video, A, won't get to the end, and B, will never even do half the things we say in here, not even a fraction of them. So if you're here at the end, then I want for us to now be open with you, because we are trying to be educators in the world, is to say that if you are honestly getting in your hakama or getting in your dojo gi and you're wearing a karate belt and you're putting your sword in your karate belt, you don't even have an obi, and a traditional samurai obi, not the new karate versions, and you're sort of got the books on your bookshelf but they're not very well read, or they're not very well battered, and they've not got notes all over them, you don't have a folder for all the ninja stuff, you don't have notebooks. I have got leather bound notebooks by a lot, and they're not cheap, and I am not rich. I have spent the money I should have spent on holidays and things like that producing things that make me a better person at this topic. Yeah, so what we're saying is ditch that fantasy, get rid of that fantasy. It should be gone. And I'm hoping through this video that you turn up to your martial arts class and after the next few weeks or the next few months, you think to yourself, I'm just doing the same thing and not really much has changed, and I haven't changed my ability. So to bring it back down to the absolute basics, the year has seasons. It has the 4 seasons, especially if you live where I am, Northern Hemisphere, midway around, you get 4 distinct seasons, and it becomes very very monotonous. Just keep doing it year after year after year. So what you do is you add something every year to each season, some celebration, some festival, some knowledge, some information. So every time you train, it's like a season. If you don't acquire new information, or you don't make yourself or push yourself deeper into that information, and I don't mean just practice the same pattern over again, I mean explore the information deep down and push it down, then you're doing it wrong. In the old days, if you've been with me for a long time, Steven used to do all the complicated stuff and go all over the place in crazy places, and I'd be like, Steven, come back, basics. But we're past that now. We're past that 10 years. We're into the second set of 10 years where those people who've been following me now should be well up on the basics, and they are. Many of you are. And if you are one of my followers, absolutely, I consider you a Shinobi soldier. I know it's one of those YouTube things, and it's another idea to put to you to sort of capture you in, but that's it. You are one of Antony Cummins' Shinobi soldiers, and Steven is out there doing his thing, and you should be following Steven's channel, so make sure you are. So the idea behind this video is me and Steven have made it so that it's a genuine information. All of the information in it is correct, but what it should do is have an aftertaste in your mouth where you think, I'm really bored now of doing the same kata. I'm really bored of going for a drink with the dojo guys and we just talk about, oh, this block and this martial arts move. And like, I went to a seminar, I did a seminar once, I run a seminar, and everybody's like, yeah. And afterwards they all just talked about martial arts for hours and hours and hours. So anyway, I'll leave it with you guys. I'm glad that you got to the end of this thingy, and I will see you next time.